Okay. Welcome to day 2 of the boot camp, and welcome to component 2, differentiation and instruction, led by none other than our husband and wife duo, Stephanie and Brad Led, who are awesome presenters. I am Delisa Brooks. I am National Board Certified in School Counseling. And we also have Kim Patterson, who's also going to be facilitating because this is such a large group. We both, Kim and I, will both be monitoring the chat room and helping the presenters answer any questions you may have. We do want this to be engaging and informative. So even though everyone must remain muted, please, it's our hopes that you keep your camera on so that certainly we can, see you. And we want to see you. Be sure to ask questions in the chat. And we do want you to unmute if prompted so by Brad, or Stephanie. This is going to be recorded, and we are recording the session again so that you may watch it later. I am posting today's attendance form in the chat room. So please complete it to receive a professional learning credit. You only have to complete it once for the whole day. So I'm going to post this to the chat right now. And there we go. Oops, hold on one second. Let me try it again. Okay, there is the attendance for day 2. I'm also going to provide links to register in Power School for professional learning credit. If you want your CEU credits, I am posting that now as well. I will keep posting it in the chat periodically just so that everyone, has a chance to see it. So please let everyone know that you are here and what you are learning. Please use the following hashtags. I know I'm giving you a lot, but I will keep posting these in the chat. Please share with individuals the awesome things that you're learning about from Brad and Stephanie. And I'm later at the end of the session, I'm going to post the links for facilitators and others, like the bootcamp website and also the bootcamp bulletin board. I'm sure you may have seen it yesterday, but I'll be posting those toward the end of the session. Welcome, and I will now turn it over to our fabulous presenters, Stephanie and Brad.
Hey guys, so I will tell you, I'm so thankful for our ambassadors for helping us facilitate, because I was telling Dr. Brooks and Ms. Patterson, we are really bad about looking at the chat when we're presenting. And so if there's something that we say that you have a question about, or you need some clarification, or you just have a comment or whatever, feel free to drop that in the chat and one of these ladies can hopefully answer. If not, then they're going to just jump right in and tell us to hush up that there's a question. Also, again, feel free. I don't know how big this group is going to get today, but if it's a situation where you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, then by all means, we want this to be interactive. So component 2 is differentiation and instruction. As Dr. Brooks had said, we are Brad and Stephanie Lett. We are a husband-wife team. We don't see that very often in national boards, but we're excited to get to kind of go through this journey together and to get to present together. He is excited. He just doesn't really look like it right now.
Well, I keep seeing people pop up on the participants list, and I keep hitting admit. I'm trying to.
So I am certified in early adolescent ELA in 2018. I did all 4 components in 1 year. Don't necessarily recommend that for everybody, but it worked for me. And so I then in 2019, a year after I had the blood, the sweat, the tears, and he saw me freak out over the whole thing, I certify, and he's working on his EDS, and he's like, I think I'll do this too. And I'm like, okay, you coach, you're working on your EDS, and you're going to do all 4 components in 1 year. I mean, what could go wrong? And we have 5 kids. So, but he's certified as well. And so last year, the network, the Alabama NBCT network, and they basically enlisted ambassadors. And so we both became ambassadors. And then most recently, I was able to accept a position on the board of directors as outreach. And so I'm really excited now that hopefully, knock on wood, we can get back to a little more normalcy. I'm hoping to get some of the ambassadors into schools and do some things to really just grow our number of NBCTs across the state. So that's kind of, I guess, a little bit about us. Here is our family. There are still watermarks on these pictures because we just had these made like less than a week ago. And so this is our kids, with the exception of one. We have a 20-year-old who wasn't there for pictures, but these are our kids. We have kids ranging from 4 years old all the way up to 20. Brad coaches baseball and he coaches football. And so we've got the little football thing there. And then one of our bucket list items is to go to all 30 Major League Baseball stadiums. So that top picture is us in Kansas City this summer. We actually got to knock out 3 of those stadiums this summer. So just a little bit about us. So we have some goals for the session today. We're going to talk about what differentiation is, because I think that is a term that is not just set on one particular thing. There's so many different ways to differentiate. And so we're going to talk about what differentiation is. We're going to look at kind of the big ideas of component 2. I will tell you, I know some of you probably sat in the component 4 session yesterday, and you're probably extremely overwhelmed. Component 4 is a lot to take in. Components 3 and 4 are pretty similar regardless of your certificate area. Component 2 really is different from certificate area to certificate area. And so we're going to try to go over kind of the big ideas, but you're really going to have to dive in what your certificate requires you to do. We're going to talk about some of the standards for this component. We're really going to dive into selecting materials and students and things like that to use for component 2. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the scoring rubric. We're going to go over the forms and evidence. If you sat in the component 4 session yesterday, there are so many forms for component 4. There are not that many forms for component 2. And we're going to talk about, writing the National Board Way. You probably heard a little bit about that yesterday. I'm a language arts teacher, and so that was something that I really struggled with. But the way you write for national boards is nothing like the way you write, the way we were taught to write in school, and the way you write in grad school and things like that. And then we're just going to talk about networking.
So everything with national boards kind of goes, and there's, with component 2, there's no different. So everything kind of goes back to your 5 core propositions. And those are, that teachers are committed to their students and their learning. They know their subjects, but not only do they know their subject, but they know how to teach those subjects. Responsible for managing and monitoring student learning. So giving feedback, those type things, that they think systematically about their practice, and that they are members of learning communities.
So to talk a little bit about how the components are scored, and if you sat through our scoring session yesterday, you've already heard this, but there are 4 components, and you would think, oh, well, they're weighted evenly because there's 4 of them, but it's not this 25% across the board. Your test, component 1, is actually overall 40% of your final score. And you can see kind of the breakdown there. The selected responses, like your multiple choice items, and then those 3 constructed response are essay questions. And so that ends up being 40% of your score. Component 3 is your video component. I know some of you are probably going to sit through that session this afternoon. That is going to be 30% of your score. And then 15 comes from component 2 and 15 comes from component 4. Component 2, I will say, I thought I did decent on it, and it ended up being my highest score. I scored a 3.75 on component 2. He
3.5.
He scored a 3.5 on it. And I don't know how you felt about it. I felt like my component 3 was my stronger one, and then I ended up scoring a little bit higher on component 2. So.
All right, so we're going to kind of start at the very beginning here, and we're going to kind of show you how to navigate the National Board website, so that way you can find your component 2 directions. So if we go to nbpts.org, all right, and I've got to move some things around on my screen that you guys can't see in order to get to it. There's a red button there that says Get Certified, and we're going to click it. We're going to scroll down to where we've got the Candidate Center, and first time in returning candidate resources, we're going to click Learn More. All right, now under this, we can get a lot of the general information here. You know, some forms like our eligibility forms, requests for testing accommodations, our release forms. All of that stuff is right here. But if we scroll down to the bottom, we've got our discipline. All right, so I'm just going to choose what I certified in, which is career and technical education. And then over to the right there, we've got our developmental level. Now you may have AY or EY, ELA, you know, something like that there, that where your age ranges really matter as far as what you select. But for career tech, there was not that. All right, so now I can scroll down and I can get a zip file from my component 1, component 2, component 3, component 4, as well as my standards. All right, it's very important that you print your standards, study those, and kind of learn exactly what you know, National Boards is looking for. But when I click, you know, if I were to click on component 2 right there, it would pull up the forms for me that are going to be needed in component 2, as well as all of my directions.
So this is going to be a little interactive here. So y'all humor me and participate, please. So let's just talk a little bit about what differentiation is. And Kim and Delissa, y'all are going to have to help me out because I've not got the chat pulled up, and we can pull it up. But so what is differentiation? What is it not? What does it look like? And you can answer all of those questions. You can answer one of those questions, but let's just have a little discussion about differentiation. What is it? What is it not? What does it look like? Okay. So meeting students where they are, it's definitely not one size fits all. Students showing what they know. It's not less challenging work. I like that. Individual learning, different types of instruction for different learning types. I think learning styles, knowing your students' learning styles is very, very important when it comes to this component. Meeting students at their current level, being able to accommodate different learning styles, giving choice. Giving choice, I'll talk a little bit today about some ideas and some things that, you know, I do within my class as far as giving choice. Equitable learning, that's good. Lots of giving choice, knowing your students and knowing where they are on all levels. And I know this gets really hard when you have larger classes. That's one thing that, you know, if you're blessed to have smaller class sizes, like, props to you. But I know, like, you know, in an English language arts classroom, my class sizes, you know, they're so different. Sometimes I'll have like a class of maybe 12, and then I'll have a class of like 31, 32. And so, you know, I love Natasha's considering learning styles and interests. I think that's very, very important, is interest too, because you know, if you said in the component 4 meeting, I keep referencing that, but a lot of things in component 4 go back to your knowledge of students. But I think the whole process of national boards is knowledge of students, knowing who your students are inside, but also outside of the classroom, knowing, you know, if you've got a kid who is really having some rough things going on at home, knowing that is going to lead or should lead the way that you know, do things with that child. You know, I always tell my students, I don't treat you all the same. And a lot of times they just really freak out over that. And So I told them, you shouldn't want to be treated the same. If you're having a bad day, don't you want me to show you grace? Because I would want you to show me grace if I'm having a bad day. And if this person needs a little extra help, don't you want me to give them that little extra help they need? Because you're going to want me to, accommodate you when that's necessary. And so I think it is about, you don't treat them all the same. It's equity.
So when I think about differentiation, when it comes to national boards, because you're going to be asked to show differentiation. I think there's two very easy, very distinctive ways to do that. All right. So maybe we have one goal that, you have two different students that they have two different projects or two different assignments, two different ways that they can achieve the same goal, or your kids have the same project, the same assignment, the same whatever you're doing in your classroom, but the object is to reach two separate goals. The goals for the students are different. So we've got a quick video that we're going to attempt to share with you. The sound quality on our end was not very good when we tried to play this earlier, but we think we may have it worked out to where it will sound a little bit better.
Kim, you're going to have to give us a thumbs up or something and let us know if we're good.
That face that is usually covered by her phone has finally made an appearance.
What's at the heart or the essence of the 4 national board components are students. Students are the heart of everything that matters in the teaching profession.
Component 2 is, how are you going to differentiate for your students? How are you going to make that instruction comprehensible? And how are you going to make it meet their individual needs so they can be successful?
We need to make small adjustments in how we instruct, how we engage, how we get students participating in our lessons.
Every kid's different. You can't just use one program.
Our goal is to provide that kind of environment for our students where diversity is appreciated.
So then when it's time for the national board selection of your artifacts, you really pick the couple pieces that really mean the most to you and what they're learning.
Our artifacts are the most beautiful things that are out there.
You analyze, and then you reflect, and you analyze, and reflect, and analyze more.
It's really about looking at the progress and the facilitation of learning that you were able to provide for those students to see that growth along the way.
Looking at student work is so fun.
I think it's okay to say this student has made gains, and more so of the pride I have for that student, this student has pride in their own work, in their own ability, in their own growth. And to me, that's data all on its own.
I didn't end up picking my best students' pieces, but it really showed who he was as a learner.
But at the end of the day, it's really, what do you want your kids to be able to do? What do you want them to know? And how are you going to get them there?
What are they really interested in? How can I get them to really dive in so I can take a step back and let them actually engage?
I so believe that everybody really needs to be teaching to the wide range of learners in their classroom. This is my 9th year as an educator, and I stay committed to board certification.
Okay, so as I told you guys before, can y'all hear okay? Can everybody hear okay? Are we good? Okay. We worried when we did the run through, it just didn't work so great. So as I said, in components 3 and 4, they're very similar, the directions, but in component 2, it is a little different. And so regardless of your certificate area, these are the things that in component 2 that you're going to be asked to do. You're going to highlight your ability to evaluate learning strengths and needs for individual students, which goes back to a lot of the things that you guys had mentioned in the chat. You're going to plan and implement appropriate differentiated instruction for those students. And as many of you mentioned, that's going to look different from classroom to classroom. Analyze and modify instructional strategies and materials based on ongoing assessments. So you're going to set those goals, and then you're going to see kind of what worked and what didn't, and you're going to use your formative assessments and things to drive your instruction. You're going to choose one or more students and or activities to feature as examples of how you differentiate instruction for your students. And the reason that says one or more students is that's where it's different from certificate area to certificate area. So that's going to be very specific to your certificate area. Both of us actually had to choose 2 students, but there are certificate areas like literacy, for instance, where you use 1 student. And some people may say, well, how do you show differentiation when you're showing 1 student? But that is how that certificate reads. There are certificate areas where you can even focus on groups. And so that's why that says 1 or more. Choose students with different needs and either ability or learning style. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later and give you some suggestions on how to do that. And then you're going to select work samples that demonstrate your approach on teaching. So some things that you need to know, and this again will come from your certificate specific directions. So the wording is a little different from certificate area to certificate area. Like some of you will collect what they call work samples. Some it will be assessments, some it will be both. And the number that you collect will be different. And I refer to ELA a lot because that's my certificate area, but like I had to collect student samples for reading and for writing. And that's not going to be what he had to do for his certificate area. So the number of students and the individuals or groups, I kind of touched on that in the previous slide, your main focus of assignments, and then the number of pages, because the amount of pages, the amount of work samples or assessments that you show and rubrics and things like that is going to be different from certificate area to certificate area. So here are just some examples, just broken down. This isn't every certificate area, but this is just to kind of show you some different things. So for assessments, career tech, English as a new language, and exceptional needs, those are going to use the terminology assessments. And I think he's going to talk a little bit about assessment.
Yeah, your assessment doesn't necessarily have to be like a test. It could be a project. It could be many different things. We do formative and summative assessments in so many different ways. But what they are wanting there is just your actual assessment.
And then work samples, language arts, if you are generalist, literacy, library or counselor, those are going to be what they call work samples. And then art has to do both. And then math and science, they call them instructional activities. A lot of these things are very similar. Like a work sample might be like one of my work samples for ELA might be an essay that they have written, which would be an assessment. So the terminology is a little different, but a lot of it is going to be kind of the same thing. It's just the terms they use. So this is kind of a boring slide, but I felt like if you referred back to this, I wanted you guys to have all of this on here. So
there's a lot of information here. So as you collect the evidence, you're going to want to record the reasons why you select that particular student. Maybe when we're selecting students, we definitely don't want to select, you have to show differentiation. So if you pick 2 students that look, if you had a snapshot of the students and they look almost identical or almost the same, we're going to want to trade one of those students out for another student, because that way, you're showing, your diversity as far as, your ability to differentiate. So you also might want to take notes on your learning goals. What came before, what came after the assessment, because you're going to be asked to address some of that stuff in your reflection, how you address the assignment and responded to the student. Feedback is very, very, very important. We want to choose assignments that are going to feature open-ended questions or prompts. just the multiple choice, test isn't really what national boards is looking for, where there's the one definite answer. They're not really looking for regurgitation of information. They want to see more of the opportunity for kids to be creative, for them to show their critical thinking skills, and to show their understanding of the material, not that they can just select a correct answer. Choose samples that are going to demonstrate a range of understanding about the content, as well as show a progression through the topic and progression over time. So the whole goal of this is to show student growth. All right, so you're starting with the very beginning of maybe the students don't know this, or something that a student needs to improve upon. And as you go through that linear progression there, the progression over time, you show that student growth and how they are now able to accomplish things that they were not able to accomplish previously. And then we want to choose samples with meaningful feedback from you. When you're selecting your samples that you're going to submit, we always tell our candidates, make sure that it has feedback from you on it, because feedback is extremely powerful.
And more than just like, good job. Obviously if you teach elementary, you can't write all these comments and things because your kids aren't going to know how to read them. But you need to be very strategic in the feedback that you give. You need to give feedback kind of on what they did well, but also maybe feedback on things that they can do better. They're not looking for work samples where it's not a dog and pony show. That's the way I say. They want to see real. And so in reality, every student is not going to meet your goal to 100%. And so if your work samples don't show perfection, that's fine. Rarely do we have students, across the board that just give us every single thing that we want. And so just give meaningful feedback. I think you could, even at an elementary level, if you gave verbal feedback, I think that could be something that you kind of document, and maybe in your commentary, which we're going to talk about in a second, maybe you can even talk about that verbal feedback that you gave to that student. I want to hit a little bit on selecting students. I know you mentioned that, but I think it's really, really important when you're selecting your students to and again, from certificate area to certificate area, in literacy, you're picking one student, but like for me, I had to pick two. And so don't always think that you have to pick the student who is just very, very low, or the student who is just very challenging for you to get through to. Those are great, but also it's kind of a good thing to pick a student who maybe is gifted, who maybe does everything that you ask them to do, but only that. Like, they won't go above. Like, if you give them a rubric, they're going to hit everything on that rubric, but they're not necessarily going to go above that. And so maybe you need to figure out how to challenge them beyond just, that line of what you asked. And so just make sure when you're selecting students that you're able to showcase how you are differentiating. One of the things that Brad had mentioned too is, you could have the same goals and have different ways to get them to that goal, or you could have different goals in the same assignment. And so I'll just kind of give you an example of that with language arts is, I may have my students write an essay, but my goal for one student might be something to do with writing more descriptively. But my goal for another student may be something to do with just sentence structure. Maybe they are just not really even good at putting together, sentences. And so it could be something with formatting. And so you could use the same assignment and have totally different goals for them. Also, when you're talking about goals, I think it's okay to, you obviously want to have some goals. Your goals primarily should be academic, but don't shy away from social goals as well. I think of students in my class who really kind of know the answers to just about every question that I ask, but they don't necessarily feel comfortable sharing those. And so, I might have a social goal for that student to be able to share those things. Also, when you're developing your goals, I think it's okay to, in fact, I think you should steer away from using just like the exact terminology that's in your course of study goal. You may use your course of study goal to drive your goals for your students. But at the same time, I think you need to make it particular to that student.
Right. We don't want to say in our commentary that the reason why we are teaching this is because it is a state standard. You know, national board teachers go above and beyond.
Yeah, because all of us have to teach those standards, but why are these goals specific? Why do these goals need to be specific for this student in this classroom at this time? And it doesn't need to be, well, my state says that I have to teach these. Because that's what we all have to do. So analyzing student work, planning and teaching the lessons that produce the student work sample shows evidence of 4 of the 5 core propositions. So again, I had mentioned knowledge of students, like you're going back to that knowledge of students, the lessons that you select, the goals that you select, everything goes back to your knowledge of students. You know, one student that I had a few years ago, he read on grade level. He really struggled with writing, and that struggle made him want to not do it at all. And so it was like pulling teeth to get him to write. And so, you know, you can come up with all kind of things to where you're having them write. It doesn't have to necessarily be an essay. I can gauge a student's writing by having them do a project. I've had them create board games. He's done the same thing even in his career tech class, like have them create a board game. And if they're having to write out the rules and they're having to write out like question cards and things like that, you can assess writing standards by doing that. And so if a student thinks, oh, well, I'm getting to, you know, do this board game instead of having to write this essay, it almost for some of them feels like they're not having to do as much work, when really you're assessing the same standards, which goes back to what several of you mentioned about choice. Also, knowing your content area, thinking systematically, and then managing and monitoring student learning. If something's not working, what are you going to do to get them to achieve those goals? Think of analysis as insight. It's more of what you see in a student's work. And then obviously we preach using Bobby Faulkner's books. If you do not have a copy of those, you need to get one. I know I don't want to misspeak for in-service centers, but a lot of in-service centers provide those to candidates. And so do not be afraid to reach out to your in-service center and see if they have copies of those, because they're about $20 each, but they are phenomenal when it comes to, you know, helping through the national board process.
So formatting your assignments or prompts. So around page 5 or 6, it kind of varies with the certificate area. You're going to find, you know, how to format these things. How many pages can you have? National boards is really big on following directions. So if it says 11 pages, you need to stick to 11 pages, because they will not look at anything past 11 pages. I was reading for someone this past year. They had 14 pages. They had not even gotten to their reflection, and you know that their limit was 11. So 3 pages after, it would not have been graded, and the whole reflection portion of it was not in those 11 pages. So we had to find out where they could cut some stuff out. But you really do need to try to adhere to the formatting. It's going to say 1-inch margins. We've got to make sure that there's 1-inch margins. It's going to say, we had a situation with forms where it says do not modify the forms, and someone was trying to modify forms. Well, you know, you can't do that. You have to make sure that you read your directions and your instructions, and you follow things really kind of to the T. You know, can you group smaller images onto one page? Some certificate areas it will let you, some it will not. And then, like I talked about earlier, the margin and spacing restrictions.
And when we're talking about those forms and things where Brad was showing you how to navigate the National Board site and print off your certificate specific directions, your forms are going to be in that zip file or that download. And so you will, you can type directly in that form, and we'll look at those in just a second.
So submission at a glance. This is one of those pages that I really leaned on and that I really used when I was going through the process. And it's between pages 10 and 13. Once again, it depends on your certificate area, but it's going to look like this right over here on the right. All right, this is kind of the what do I need to do and what do I need to submit information. And it's all kind of in one document there. Notice it's got different file types, number of files in each section, length, and it's got additional info there. So if I'm not mistaken, this might be a ELA one. But right here, you're going to have your contextual information sheet. It tells you that it will accept, docs, a docx. It will accept a PDF. I highly suggest PDF. And as a matter of fact, I think they may be going to only doing PDFs here soon. And that will come out in obviously in new instructions. But it says to use 11-point Arial font. So you have to use 11-point Arial font for this one. And it says single spaced. Now, when it gets to your written commentary right here, no more than 13 pages. So this particular certificate area gets 13 pages. And once again, you have to use 11-point Arial font. This has to be double spaced with 1-inch margins on all sides. And then we get down into here to our instructional activities, our student work samples, and then a culminating assessment. So, and then it tells us in here exactly no more than 9 pages of instructional materials, no more than, I think that says 16 or 18 pages as student work samples. And then it breaks it down even further what you need to do right over here on the right. So when you go to actually upload these electronic submissions, you will have one box for your contextual information sheet, one box for your written commentary, and you're almost submitting this stuff as you see here.
And I'll tell you, I am very technologically challenged. And so the whole submission process was a scary thing to me because I was so worried. I've worked all year to do this. And then if it comes down to it and I don't know how to submit something, or I put something in the wrong place, it is so user friendly, you guys. And that form is definitely helpful, but the way the website is laid out is exactly like that form suggests. I mean, it'll tell you like everything that goes in that one file. And once you put it in, you can, like, let's say you upload a video and you're like, I want to make sure that I uploaded the right video to the right place and that the sound plays right and all that. Once you've uploaded it, you can click on it and replay it. We had several things when we uploaded his stuff. We would look back through it. This was more on component 4, but we would look back through something and we'd be like, oh, we need to take that out or whatever. And so we would take it back out and then put it back in. And so, and then you're not going to accidentally submit your components because it will ask you like, you are in the process of submitting component 3. Do you wish to proceed? And then you'll click submit, and then it'll ask you, I think, one more time, are you sure? And then you can submit.
So we're going to kind of go over this next slide. And then I believe right here is where we kind of want to show them some instructions. So your contextual information sheet. All right. It is connected to your instructional context in the written commentary. It's not really as repetitive as you might think. You may write a couple of things, over, but it's not that bad. It is connected and it needs to be consistent with what you see in your written commentary. So your written commentary is going to address the sub questions down here that we see in our writing. You've got different sections All right. And we'll show you this here in a minute. It's got suggested page lengths. There is a hard number that your total written commentary can only be 11 pages, 13 pages. All right. But then it says your instructional context or your planning and teaching analysis, your reflection. It may say suggested page length 2 pages, suggested page length 3 pages. You know, you do not have to stay within that suggestion for the items that we see listed here below. However, if you're writing 3 pages instead of 2 pages on something, you're going to have to take a page off of somewhere else.
Let's show them kind of what we're talking about. So we're going to see if we can navigate. I don't know if, yeah. So component 2 maybe. And again, this one's really hard to present because, you know, components 3 and 4, everybody's kind of doing the same thing. With component 2, it's so different. So do you want me to scroll?
Yeah.
Okay.
You may have to.
Thank you. Okay. So on this is kind of, and I don't know where you guys have gotten in this. So like for your reflection here, it tells you that your suggested page length is 2 pages. You know, your analysis of student work suggested length would be 10 pages, 5 pages for each of the 2 students. Those are suggestions. Instructional context, suggested length 1 page. But then if you look up here, so for, and this is English language arts, but no more than 13 pages. So all of these things together, you can't go over 13 pages, but you know, you may have a half a page over on one section, which means you're going to have to cut on the other one. Where this becomes important, I think, is this whole process is very reflective. And so for me, I feel like I always went a little over the suggested 2 pages on my reflection, which meant I was going to have to cut somewhere else, maybe in my instructional context. So what we were talking about when Brad was mentioning the sub questions and things. So these are the directions for early adolescent ELA, and even though the questions are a little different from certificate area to certificate area, they all look like this. So for instructional context, it says provide the following information in addition to the context that you supply on the contextual information sheet. And we're going to look at that in just a second, which focuses on the school or district at large. In this section, address the following questions about your selected class or classes. So it's not like it just is, okay, you have 13 pages to write about what you did, go. It really directs you. And so my suggestion, and this is on all of your portfolio components 2, 3, and 4, use these questions, answer these questions in this order, because when the assessors sit down, they are assessing, they're, you know, usually I think in a hotel room, and they're assessing component after component after component all day long. And so the easier you can make it on them, the better. And so, you know, if it asks you the question, what are the numbers, ages, and grades of the students in the class featured in this entry in the subject matter of the class, make sure you answer that. And it even in a lot of these gives you examples. What are the relevant characteristics of the students with exceptional needs and abilities that influence your planning for the sequence of instruction? And then it gives you 4 examples. So hit on all of these things that are relevant, you know, social and behavioral. You know, you're looking at physical challenges of your students. You know, if our EL population at my school is growing drastically. And so, you know, that is something that in a lot of my classes really drives my instruction and really has me doing lots of differentiation. But if you don't have a high EL population, then that's not something that you would talk about there. When you're talking about range of abilities, I mean, if you are teaching an AP class and they're all just like on this excellent level, props, great. That might not be something that you're talking about there if it's not challenges and things like that. Down here where it mentions, you know, relevant features of your teaching context that influenced your instruction. So Technology. If you have a lot of technology, then you may want to showcase that. If your school doesn't have a lot of technology, then you might also want to mention that, because that's going to be something, if you have to share a computer lab, and then that's might be something that really influences your decisions. Scheduling of classes. I know for me, seventh period teaching at the secondary level, a lot of my athletes, may leave early to go to a ball game. And so that really might, I have to be strategic in the way I do things in seventh period. If you're at a high school and you have lots of pep rallies during football season, then that really may change the way you do your last period class of the day.
So a couple of different things here on this is we always kind of teach you to the people that go through our cohort at JSU and at A&M and UAH. We always try to teach them to restate the question and then answer the question, or restate and answer kind of at the same time. So, when it says what are the relative or what are the relevant characteristics of this class that influenced your instructional strategies, a lot of times we say the relevant characteristics of this class that influenced, my instructional strategies were, and then we answer the question. We kind of bold the first few words of that sentence so that the assessor knows that, hey, we're moving on to the next question at this point. But a lot of times what we see is there were many relevant characteristics of this class that influenced my instructional strategies for this lesson. And then they move on to the next question. You have to answer the question. It's not enough to just say that you did something. You also have to show how, or tell us how you did it.
That's my thing. Don't just tell me you do it. Show me how you did it. If you differentiated, show how you differentiated. Give me examples.
We got to get back to, there we go.
So looking at the forms, I told you guys, if you did component 4 yesterday, there are 7, 8, 9 forms for component 4. So it's like information overload. There really aren't with this one. So the main form we had mentioned previously is the contextual information sheet. You will fill out one of these for all 3 of your portfolio components. So it is a form that looks very similar from component to component. However, you will fill it out for each one. And here's the thing, some people don't do them all in 1 year. I actually did them all in 1 year, but I used a different class for component 2 than I did for components 3 and 4. And so, if you've done the component 4 session, then you've probably seen this form, but this is just very general. This is where Brad was talking about, you do not modify anything on the form. All you're going to do is type into those little brackets right there.
Do not remove the brackets.
Do not remove the brackets, just type everything in between. And it tells you that on here. Respond to the prompts below, no more than 1 single space page in Arial 11-point font. So, it's very specific, just follow the directions. Type your response in the brackets, following the prompt, do not delete or alter the prompts. And the big thing about this form is it says briefly identify the type of school or program in which you teach and the grade subject configuration. This doesn't have to be like this. You don't have room for it to be. I don't want to say it doesn't have to be. It can't be this big lengthy response. Just answer the question here. So here, like grades, for me, I teach 8th grade. I also have a journalism class at 7th. So I might do 7th and 8th, or 7/8 there. Age levels, most of my kids in the class that I probably used were 13 to 14 years old. So I'm going to do like 13-14. Number of students taught daily, that's not asking you like just in the specific class that you're using. It's saying, so like if you're secondary and you teach 170 students a day, then you're going to put 170 there. Average number of students in each class, just average it out. They're not going to, go back and say, well, you said that your average is 23 and it's really 25. Just give them a general average. And then the courses that you teach. not even necessarily the course that you're using, but like for me, the courses that I teach 8th grade ELA and I teach journalism. So I would probably put both there. You can't scroll, it's just a screenshot. So for number 3, and also for number 1, if it gives you things to talk about, so like, here it says single grade departmentalized, interdisciplinary teams, etc. Mention those things if they're relevant. Down here, what information about your teaching context do you believe would be important for assessors to know to understand your portfolio entry? You're giving them a snapshot of the class that you're choosing to use. And so really think like in component 3, they get to see inside your classroom with a video. Component 2, they don't. So help them see inside your classroom. And so it gives you some suggestions. If you have state or district mandates, you're going to mention those. With that being said, we try really hard to eliminate bias. So, I'm not going to say ACAP. My state mandates the ACAP test because that's going to identify that I am in Alabama. They could easily look that up. So I'm going to say something to do with my state mandates, or there is a state mandated summative assessment or something along those lines. Anything that could be identifiable, you want to not mention the actual name because, again, we want to eliminate bias. And so, I've seen people mention things like, we do iReady or we do Star Reading or whatever. I've always said, just what if you get an assessor? And I like to think that they don't do this, but what if you had an assessor that's like, oh, they use iReady, that's a horrible program. And they automatically have that bias. And so I try to say to do things like, say a computerized or an individualized computer program, assessment program or something like that, just describe it. It even talks about the type of community and your access to current technology. If it's important, mention those things there. Can you think of anything else to add?
Hey, can I interrupt real quick?
Yes, absolutely.
I've got a couple of people.
Okay.
One is talking about they teach one subject, but is thinking about certifying in another one, and how that would work. I've also got one. Let me just read this real quick. How would this work if I'm borrowing a class? I do not have a number I teach daily. I also do not have an average in each class. How would I answer that?
So if you borrowed a class, I feel like, and I mean, people have to do this all the time. So if you borrow a class, I would think that I would probably just put the number of that class. I think that would work. I was trying to see, I've actually pulled the chat up over here.
How does pacing work if you have a different group of students every 9 weeks? That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't really, that's one that I have a friend at my school that is in that exact same situation. She teaches art and every 9 weeks she gets new students. So in a situation like that, I'm not really sure. Dr. Brooks, I don't know if you kind of have a suggestion on that one.
You would almost have to gather everything that you need within those 9 weeks for those students.
Yes.
I mean, that one's a tough one. And I see she's saying she's leaning towards certifying with ELA since she's more experienced with that. And that is a situation where you could always borrow a class. I have my admin degree now, and eventually I hope to pursue that. And so in that situation, I would have to borrow a language arts class in my certificate age range, early adolescent, in order to do my maintenance of certificate. So that's completely doable. If I defer to component due to COVID, school closures, does the year count? So we actually had this question come up yesterday. We looked it up just to make sure. So do you want to go ahead?
It does not count toward your 3 or 5 years to certify.
Yeah, and it reads, if you deferred components to 2021-22, you will have an extension on 3 and 5 year component and candidacy window. This extension is in addition to any extension already applied to your candidacy from components deferred from 1920 to 2021. So you should be good there. These are just a couple more forms. You know, this one these are relevant to English language arts. So I had told you guys I had to, for English language arts, you have to do things with your students' responses to reading and your students' responses to writing. And a lot of people get really confused about these. I think all certificate areas have them. This is really kind of a cover page. And so a lot of people want to come down here and type or put pictures or something. That is not what these pages are for. Basically, what you're going to do is put your candidate ID number in here. Once you register and all that, you'll get a candidate ID number. You will type that in here. And then, you know, just whatever your form says, you're just going to fill in the brackets. So like I had 2 students that I had to write about and to show work samples and things. So if it was my student A, I'm going to put an X in student A, and then I'm going to tell if it's a print-based text or non-print. And then that's going to be my cover page. It's going to go before in my PDF because everything's scanned in as a PDF. That's all I'm going to do to this. And then my student work samples and things are going to go after that. Those are just kind of confusing because a lot of people think, well, really, that's all I do to that form? Yes, that is all that you do to that form. If you're, I think maybe we hit on this in just a second. I'm not sure. If not, the question, I'm doing 2 and 4 this year. Can I use the same unit? So there are a couple of little guidelines to that. We did a presentation on component 3 and it might have been in it. We'll look in just a second. So this is just kind of like a little thing when we were talking about national boards and how the writing is totally different. So when you see the number 7, you see a contraction, you see the ampersand, those are not things that you would typically include in academic writing. However, for national boards, those are completely fine. And that's really kind of hard, I think, to wrap your head around. Not only is it perfectly fine, you're probably going to need to use some of that stuff because you're going to really struggle probably to, usually when people start out, they think, oh, there's no way I'm going to get 11 pages or 13 pages. And then you get to the point that you're like, oh my gosh, I've got to cut drastically. Cover pages don't count as part of your total number of pages. Good. All right, so here are just some written commentary tips, and we've hit on a couple of these.
So as we said earlier, you're going to type out the questions, but it's kind of only temporary. Like I said, restate them and kind of bold those. You have to kind of abandon good writing or writing for the academia world. You can use the ampersand, you can use contractions, you can use numbers. Those are all okay. Just answer the question. A lot of times people throw so much extra fluff in there, but this is a strictly answer the question type of writing. You do not have to throw extra stuff in there. Like we said, contractions, spacing, paragraphs. Make sure that you follow directions when it comes to spacing. You don't want to indent your paragraphs. You are just going to start typing. There will be no paragraphs. There will be no, tabbing in. There will be no starting of a second paragraph. You're literally going to start typing, and then 11 pages, 13 pages later, you're going to end. Try not to abbreviate too much. And if you do, spell it out the first time. A lot of times what you see is people use S for student or SS for students. It is okay to abbreviate, but if you have to have a legend at the bottom to turn in so they know what you are writing about, that's not a good thing. If you name a struggle, you need to tell what you're doing about it, and that comes a little bit more toward your reflection. It is okay to struggle because you're going to, kind of tell what you do about it. You may struggle at the very beginning, figure it out, and then show a lot of student growth, and that's okay. So you kind of have to know the difference between descriptive, analytic, and reflective writing. You can read about this in the general instructions. Sentence stems from Bobby Faulkner's books are awesome. One of my favorite ones is because I know that this student does this, I chose to do this. It shows that you are taking responsibility for that student's learning. As a NBCT, we don't say, I hope to do this, or we might do this. We are very definitive in what we say. And we say, because I did this, this child went up a grade level in their reading. Address your standards and 5 core propositions as you go, but you don't want to say, according to core proposition 5, I achieved this by. You kind of want to be overt or covert about that. We want to give evidence and we want to be consistent. But another thing that we do is we don't cite stuff. I did run across that for the first time this past year. You don't have to cite anything.
Let's click right here really quickly. So this is in here and you guys should have access to this. I really don't even know where I got this, if I'm just being honest. I've just used it in presentations. And so, as he mentioned, Bobby Faulkner's books have tons of sentence stems and things that you can use, but this is also a really quick little document that has analytical and reflective sentence stems to show, like, because my students are visual learners, I chose to blah, 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 blah. When you're writing, I think one thing that we always like to mention is, it's really hard a lot of times to kind of toot our own horn and be like, look what I did. But that really is like, you want to put the action on yourself. I chose to do this. It's not even as much the students did this. You chose for the students to do this because of your knowledge of students, because you know that your students have these learning styles, or because these students are interested in sci-fi. You chose to group these students together because blah, 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 blah. And so, you've got to give the action to you got to put the action on you. And I think a lot of times that's hard for us to do, but that's what this process is about. You're trying to become a national board certified teacher. You're not trying to have your students do it. And so you're going to put a lot of the action on yourself. And that's where I think these sentence stems become really important.
Let me move stuff back around on the screen right here. All right, so reflection. Your reflection is extremely important. All right, I feel like maybe this gets assessed, you don't want to say more than anything else, but it's your kind of chance to right wrongs, as well as kind of put a finale on things. So you want to make sure that you point out, and you have to answer the questions, but the next steps for the instructions for these students or this student that you picked, depending on certificate area. All right. It shows that the learning and their growth with this doesn't end just because I'm finished with this project for national boards. What are you going to do to continue their learning? Next time, what will you do differently, or will you do it the same? A couple of things that we really don't ever want to say is next time I would do nothing different. The lesson was great. There is always something that you can do to improve on. And I feel like one of the worst things that you could possibly say is I would give the student more time to complete the assignment, because now that may be something that you choose to do, and it may be something that you point out, but that cannot be the only thing that you want to put in there. You don't kind of want to rake yourself over the coals. You don't want to make yourself sound like a bad teacher, but at the same time, you need to point out at least something that you can do to improve upon, as well as you're also going to point out things that you did well, that you are going to keep in this lesson.
So some general reminders. You can visit general portfolio instructions, which you can locate those on the website before you, like on the initial page, before you go to the certificate specific ones. But you can read all about descriptive, analytical, and reflective writing because there is a time and a purpose for each of those things. We actually do a little presentation on the 3 types of writing within the cohorts that we lead. I think descriptive is the easiest type of writing, but at the same time, it's the least important during this process because, you know, telling us what you're doing is nowhere nearly as important as telling us why you did those things, showing us, analyzing your choices, and then reflecting on those choices. And so there is a time and a place to do all of those things. And so you can kind of look at that in your general portfolio instructions. Also, Bobby Faulkner's book, she talks a lot about that. And then I think it's this afternoon, maybe there's a session on that. That might have been yesterday. I think it was this afternoon though. You preach this a lot, the rubric thing.
In your rubrics, in the back of your component directions, you can find the rubrics back there where it tells you exactly what they are looking for as far as, you know, to score a 3, to score a 4, to score a 2, which we don't want to do. But a lot of what's different is the verbiage that is used back there. That's something that Dr. Shields had kind of taught me. And so if you will use kind of the same verbiage that is in those rubrics in the back, it does help to increase your score. But it's, you know, we shouldn't be giving projects without a rubric to our kids. So National Boards gives us a little bit of a rubric to follow as well. And then get your student release forms signed. I would do that as one of the first things I would do when I go back to class. I would have those things printed off. They would go home when we send everything else home to be signed. So that way, when all of the, you know, when it comes back, I would go ahead and file those away. It is fraudulent to collect student data, work samples, photos, videos, any of that without the signed release, and to use it for national boards. I think that needs to be added in there because we collect student data and we collect work samples and all that stuff all the time, but to actually use it for the national boards is completely
and
different.
I will say, as far as student releases and things, it becomes not as huge of an issue with component 2, because with component 3, you're doing videos. So any person that is shown in those videos, you have to have a signed release on. Component 4, you're using a lot of student work samples, you're using pictures, you're using just all this stuff that it's almost like you have to have a signed release from every single person in the class that you're using, just because of all the data and things you're collecting. With component 2, you don't necessarily have to have one from every single person in the class, because you're not using work from every single person in the class. And so I think it becomes a little easier with this one. I know a lot of teachers in the past have really struggled, especially like with component 3, you're showing a video and you have like all these students and you've got like those 1 or 2 students that you're just struggling to get those forms back. They actually have a digital form now as well. They have them in different languages. I think all this can be found on the National Board site. But you know, the one thing I did, I wish I would have started this at the beginning of the school year, but I didn't decide until maybe October, November that I wanted to do national boards. And so starting at the beginning of the year, when you're sending, which a lot of things are digital now, but when you're sending things home at the beginning of the year, go ahead and have these printed off and send these release forms home then as well. And what I did with mine, I made it as easy as possible. It's a super quick form to fill out, but anything that I could fill out on my own, like my name, because on the form, it'll say, basically you have to fill in your name and you're just saying, I'm going through the national board process, you know, here's what that's about. And then there's like a place to put the school name, I think the school address, maybe the student's name, the parent's signature, and the date. And so anything that I could fill in for them, I did. And then I highlighted where I needed them to do stuff, because I'm like, if they just see, okay, I've just got to sign here, I've got to write this in here, they're more likely to fill it out than if they're having to like figure out where and all of that. So make those forms as easy as possible if you send them home to get signed. So this is huge to us. Obviously, we, we help with the board of directors with national boards, but we also do a ton of stuff through the in-service centers. But we've had, even in the last couple of days, I've had candidates say, look, I didn't even know that there was support out there. And when I went through this, like, I did it completely alone. I will say, I did not get involved with the in-service center until like the last of April, right before I submitted. And I actually went to an event that JSU puts on. It's like boot camp, except it's when you're at the end of the process, and it's like a writing retreat, and you get to go in and have people look at your writing and give you feedback and things like that. And so I didn't find out until the very end that existed. But do not go through this process alone. We have 11 different in-service centers spread out all across the state, and they all receive money to support national board candidates. And we have some amazing in-service center directors and some amazing national board support at those in-service centers. The in-service centers work really well together as well. I know several of the in-service center directors, they meet together and do things. And so at JSU, we've had people from South Alabama read for our candidates in North Alabama. And so, utilize those in-service centers, or really even if you have a local cohort within your school or your county or something, just get involved. Don't go through it alone. Without support, if you kind of go through this by yourself, you are about 30 to 40% of people achieve the first time. If you have regional support, or just, a local cohort or something like that, that number goes up to 68%. And then if you actually go through the process with somebody within the same certificate area as you, that number goes up to about 74%. Those are some pretty decent certificates. And this is not an easy process. I'm not going to say that it is. And so you want to have all the support that you can get going through it, so that you don't have to, redo a component.
All right. So national board and social media. We have the Alabama NBCT network has individual Facebook pages set up per certificate area, which is a really good thing. You can go through there and you can ask questions in the specific content area that you are wanting to achieve certification in. I would highly suggest using that. I would be leery and be very careful about national social media groups. You can get some bad information in there from people that maybe they do not have the most up-to-date information. When you use the Alabama NBCT network ones, we have someone that is assigned to those specific groups, and that if there's misinformation put out there, we go in and we correct that. Use the regional in-service centers. I think that's really, really, really important. If you can go through this with someone in the same certificate area, as well as, take advantage of the regional in-service centers, getting your materials read, those type of things. I think it's extremely important, and it becomes more beneficial to you.
And here's the thing, you don't necessarily have to, have that person in your school in the same certificate area. That's where I think I'm really big in building a network. And so that's where even going to those in-service centers, you will meet people going through the exact same thing as you at the exact same time as you. And so you may not teach in the same school district, but you may be able to meet somebody in the same certificate area as you that you can talk to, because I mentor candidates, like tons of candidates. We mentor candidates. We figured it up yesterday or the day before. I think it's 28 school districts through the
17% of the school districts now.
Yeah, and so we've seen every certificate area imaginable. This past time, I actually read for a PE candidate, and that was a new one for me. But it's one of those things where I can read things for you and I can give you feedback. But, as far as differentiation in PE, like I don't have my head wrapped around that like someone else who is a PE teacher will. And so that's why networking, I think, is so, so important. So obviously, I don't know if you guys know Leslie Hughes. She did the recorded component 1 session. She, some of these slides I kind of stole from her, and this was one of hers. So obviously, you know, read all of your materials carefully. Contact your in-service center if you have questions, but I will tell you we are the contact of a couple of in-service centers. And if I don't know the answer, a lot of times I will use my network of people and I will contact them and ask them, but also 1-800-22-TEACH is the national board number. And so a lot of people, you know, I will tell them to go there. But one thing that Amber Trantham at the JSU In-Service Center, one thing that she kind of told me when I was going through the process, which I think is extremely valuable, is if you call, you don't really have a record of that. It's just kind of like you heard what they said. If you submit a question online, then you have that paper trail. And one thing that I know Krista Markham that is over, she's the president of the network. She and I, like, she sends me questions and I send her questions, and she'll be like, I have a candidate that blah, blah, blah. And so if I know the answer, I'll give it to her. If we don't know the answer, we will email the national boards. And so then she will forward me the email. Here's the answer that I got. And so we have that email trail that if anything were to ever come up, we could be like, oh, look, but here's what this says. And so just having that paper trail, I think, is really important. So I know this was all over the place, this one, and I will tell you, we've presented this one last year and this year before we presented component 3. And again, 3 and 4 are so similar for all certificate areas. So we just really tried to give you guys a brief overview of and some suggestions on component 2. But I know it may seem kind of all over the place. It's just really hard. It's one of those things where you have to dive into your directions to know exactly what you have to do. So, questions.
Feel free to type it in the chat or unmute and talk away.
So I see a couple of questions here. Is it extremely difficult to do components 3 and 4 simultaneously, or what are your suggestions? That to me is just it's very specific. You know, I did all 4. I actually started with component 2, like I did them all in the same year, but I started with component 2. I wish that I would have started with component 4. Because that's one of those things, you're gathering so much data for component 4. And so starting the year gathering data, I think is very, very important to do what you need to do with component 4. But I will say I overlapped them. I was definitely doing 3 and 4 at the same time. So I think it's completely doable because, and again, I use different classes for component 2. I use a different class than I did for 3 and 4. And so just the first thing that I would do, and I don't know how much we really hit on this when he was showing you how to find your directions and your standards and things, I would get a binder, a 2 or maybe even 3-inch binder, and I would go and I would print off my content or my certificate specific standards, because I don't know how much we really said about that. But when we say standards, it's not your state standards or course of study standards. These are standards specific to your certificate area and national boards. And some of ours overlap, but some of his are different than mine. And so I would print those off and put them in a binder. And then I would also go ahead and print off my component directions for all 4 components, and I would put them in a binder, and I would start annotating the heck out of them. I would mark them up. One of the suggestions that I gave yesterday in a presentation we did was on my standards. I would go through and I would take 3 highlighters, and when it mentions things, if it's something I do all the time in my class, I'm going to highlight it in one color. And in the margin, I'm going to put some lessons that I know, oh, I do this, I teach this, and things like that. If it's something that I do sometimes, I'm going to highlight it in a different color. And if it's something that I know I have to do, I've got some work to do on it, I'm going to highlight it in a 3rd color, just so it's kind of like this working document of my thoughts. Same thing when you're printing off your directions for your portfolio components. I would annotate in the margins of lessons that I know that is going to hit on those things. for each of your components, when you look at your directions, there are going to be standards that are addressed in that particular component. And so I would look at those standards and say, okay, what lessons do I teach that really showcase these particular standards? When you're talking about students, one thing that we always mention that we, I think, didn't mention this time is when you're picking specific students, if it says that you need to pick 2, I would go ahead and plan on 3 or maybe 4.
You never know when somebody might move or, they end up becoming pretty much the same student and you can't show the differentiation. So I would pick at least 3 to 4 unless you've got just a really good handle on that. When I went through the process, scholarships were not given out until November. And then it was at the end of November, and I got the scholarship at the end of November, and I didn't start mine until December. So I did all 4 of mine really starting in December, starting with 4, collecting the data, completing 2, 3 was the last one I did, and then I took the test. It just depends on you and how much, time that you have and what you want to put into it if you're ready to dive that far into it. I did see a question on there earlier. Is there anywhere where you can see examples of stuff? Atlas, you can get an Atlas account through your in-service center, and you can see videos for 3. And if I'm not mistaken, it does have the commentary and stuff like that with them. I don't know that you see low examples, but I do know that you can kind of see what different things have scored. But I don't know that they have component 2.
And the thing with Atlas is, national boards in 2014, they kind of revamped the process, and that's when they did it to where there's the 4 components and things now. And so all of these videos are from the old process. Atlas really isn't meant just for national boards. It's meant to show you like examples of accomplished teaching. I will say that when I went on and watched the videos, and not to discredit anyone on there, but when I went on and watched the videos, it did make me feel a little better because I felt like I needed to have like the perfect video or the perfect work sample or whatever. And so I think going on to Atlas really helped me wrap my head around the fact that they're not wanting like this fake perfect classroom. They're wanting real. And I think the reason that there aren't a lot of examples out there, and I will say, it is not just frowned upon. It is like, we'll get you in trouble if you share, like we can't share with you our components that we submitted because they have been scored by the national board and we are certified. And so we cannot share those.
You can actually get your teaching license pulled.
Yeah, it's a really big deal. And so that's why there aren't examples out there, but that's part of the beauty of the process is that 3 to 4% of teachers in the nation are national board certified. And so it is this like huge achievement. I was saying in a session yesterday, it doesn't matter how many degrees we get, it's just one of those things where this to me is by far my biggest professional accomplishment. And so the beauty in it is when I went through the process a few years ago, what I did in that classroom at that time with those students is not the same time, they're not the same thing that I would do this year with the students I'm going to have in my class. And the same thing, my 2nd period and my 7th period, the things I might teach the same lesson, but the way I do it is going to be totally different. And so there's not like a right and a wrong way to do these components. And that's why there aren't examples, because, your kids in your class at this time, what they need is different from what someone else has done. And so that's why there aren't like all these examples and things out there.
So this isn't a component 2 question, it's a component 1 question. It says any advice about, I guess, taking the test next week. Download your component 1 directions, go to the back of them. They have some sample questions back there, as well as sample constructed response questions, and I would try to complete those. It's about the best advice I can give you other than studying your standards.
I will tell you another really good resource. So I know we're preaching like joining these groups and things like that, but the network, we do have an overall Alabama NBCT network Facebook group. If you join that, our network president, Krista Markham, actually uploaded a document yesterday in there, and it shows you who all the 11 in-service center directors are. And so reach out to get support. I know that we've already finalized the JSU support sessions. Those are going to, I mean, I guess it's tentative, but those are going to be one Wednesday night a month. And we really just kind of break it down like, you know, from August, we start in August and we do a general session. Then in September, we do component 4, October, we do component 2, November, we do component 3, we take December off. And in January, we start like really diving in and giving kind of some one-on-one assistance where you get to sit down with mentors and get some feedback on work samples and writing and things like that. When you're getting feedback, it's not one of those things where we're saying you need to do this, because we've already certified and your choices are your choices, but we really just kind of try to wrap our head around your components, and we ask a lot of questions.
Nor do we try to score them for you.
No.
We don't try to throw out a 3.5 or anything like that.
But you know, for component 1, there are all kind of different study guides and different things, but for me, what he mentioned, just looking at that information that they give you online, that to me, I think was the biggest help. And, you know, I'll tell you, I am not a test taker, and I have major test anxiety, and the fact that that test is worth 40% of your score really scared me. So I'm like, if I can do it, you guys can. And I'll tell you, and I'll just throw this out there for you too. Our component 1 was the lowest for both of us, our component 1 score. Our portfolios were significantly higher than our component 1. And we both scored pretty decent, I think. So I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, so Kim had mentioned, if you go to Dr. Shields, if you Google, and somebody can probably throw this in the chat, if you look up Melissa Shields Wicks, and you guys probably already have access to that with all the stuff that she sent out to you guys, but she has a site, and she has an entire page that is dedicated to national boards. And so on that page last year, I guess, we created specific groups, and I mean, we mentioned this already, but we have certificate specific groups, and ambassadors and different leaders on the board of directors actually help monitor these groups. I saw some people mention math and things like that. I actually created a group last week for the Teams Act. And so if you're not a member of that one, you may want to join that. Dr. Shields, oh good, she sent it in the emails. So Dr. Shields is an administrator on that group, as well as myself and Krista Markham. And so we're going to try to shoot out information regarding the Teams Act, anything that we find for that on that page. But those are really good resources. But your in-service centers are going to be a great source of information for you guys, these meetings and getting mentors and things like that.
Any other questions?
One of the things, and I was going to look a question earlier. So this was actually in a component 3 session that we did, but I'm quoting this. I know the question was, can the unit be the same in component 2 and component 4? This is actually relevant to components 2 and 3, but it says one of the 2 video recordings submitted for component 3 and the student work samples submitted for component 2 may be from the same unit of instruction, but must be from different lessons that have unique lesson goals and objectives. And so that's for 2 and 3. I believe with component 4, it's very similar to that. I'll just tell you, both of us really steered clear of that just because we were really worried that somehow something would overlap. And so we went in very different directions with all.
It's much better to stay far away from it than it is to chance it.
And I just somebody, when I saw Dr. Shields' name there, I'll just tell y'all, I mean, she does not toot her own horn enough. She doesn't get paid to do any of this stuff. Like, her job with the State Department really doesn't have anything to do with national boards. She just is, it's her passion, and she's very dedicated to it. And so she started doing this boot camp about 4 years ago. She has mentored, Lord only knows how many candidates. And so, y'all, I'm just telling you, she is a rock star when it comes to this. A lot of work goes into throwing this thing together, and she is good. She is good. So y'all need to definitely appreciate her and shout her out on social media. Anybody else have questions? All right, if nobody has anything, we're getting you guys out of here a little bit early. Feel free if you think of something. I know this is a lot to wrap your head around, especially doing, various sessions throughout the day. And so if you have questions, please let us know. I guess we can look at that one right there. Component timeline for candidates, completing them all in 1 year. I just really, it's hard. I feel like it's a very individualized thing.
Yeah. Obviously collecting data starting with 4 is great. As soon as you get to school, send out the release forms. When you get the release forms back, start collecting as much data as you can on your students. And then that will help you. You can start 4 and then somewhere through that process, 2 and 3 fall. And then we've always been a big advocate for taking 1 kind of at the end, because 2, 3, and 4 help you study 4-1. But like we said, it's kind of an individual thing, and that's how I would do it, but that's not necessarily how other people would do it.
And we've had a lot of people ask us, okay, well, I'm going to do this over 2 years. What do you suggest? There are so many different variations. 1 and 3 are worth 70% of your score put together. So I could see doing those the first year, just because, you're going to know 70% of your score. And then if you need to retake something, that, 30% of your score comes from 3, but you can also kind of break up component 1 and do a certain section of it if you need to. But those to me aren't as time consuming as maybe 2 and 4 are. So you may want to, do 4 at the same time you do 1. But as Brad mentioned, don't stress so much over component 1 until the spring, when it gets a little closer to taking it. Because if you're doing any of the portfolio components at the same time, you're really studying for that test, because you're really diving into those national board standards, which is really preparing you for the test. So anybody else? All right. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully you'll enjoy the rest of your day. So Kim said component 4 was actually the easiest to write for her. And we know several people who scored a 4 on it. It's just, I don't know.
Very time consuming.
It's time consuming. It's time consuming, but this is definitely the most reflective process. I'm a different teacher because of going through national boards. So, all right. Thank you guys so much.